What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Raphael. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, bro? Everything's all good on this end. It is a great week in this Rattler household on this side. Obviously, the Olympics are starting, and that is paramount. Obviously, the best athletes who represent everyone's country. Can't wait to see what's going on with that. Obviously, Team USA. We'll talk about that a little bit. Has been playing Team USA men's basketball. Team USA women's 5-on-5 is starting up as well. They got their second. They played in the All-Star game, which is kind of cool, low key. But they played Germany and they won that game obviously earlier today. So you have that going. But if you know. Happy Deadpool and Wolverine week to everyone who celebrates, including myself, who super duper celebrates. Cannot wait. Got my tickets about 2 months ago to see that joint. So I'm excited. Can't wait to peep that out and get into that. Please keep your spoilers if you've seen it. Don't tell me nothing. I don't want to hear nothing. I get violent behind spoilers. But outside of that, man, basketball is it's everywhere right now. You got the Olympics starting. Obviously, the big three still going on. Summer league, which we'll get into for a couple of guys, was a little eesh, but we'll talk about that. And then you got the TBT starting up, man. The TBT kicked off a couple of days ago and got some really good games going on. Some guys you might recognize. Some people you might see that you see. I saw a Yogi Ferrell sighting for the Louisville alumni team, which was quite exciting. I'm like, hey, look at you. I mean, hey, bro, I'm in time. You haven't seen Yogi Ferrell? He dropped like 40 in a game in the NBA one time, which is crazy. But yeah, man, just basketball everywhere. And I personally, I love it. Like I said, I'm a hoop junkie. I watch as much basketball as possible. So I'm loving it, man. I'm loving it. How's everything on your side?
Everything's blessed. Like you said, it's a good time. We're finally turning back into the swing of things. Football is getting back into training camp. To your point, you got Olympic basketball, Olympics in general. You got NCAA coming out. You got Marvel movies coming out. Like this is that swing back right before school starts and everything like that. And again, there are some weeks left before you see any NBA action, any NBA training camp and things like that. But to your point, this summer is the opportunity to get to still see NBA stars play for their respective countries and, put it all on that line and play in roles that they don't normally play in. You got MVP chance for like Dennis Schroeder. Like it is that time of the year. Before we jump into Pelicans basketball, before we jump into basketball in general, make sure you guys are following us on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok. That's No Basketball, No E. Make sure you're liking the episode below and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are not already. So in normal late July function, Vegas came out with their NBA win projections or win totals and things like that. So first off, I feel like it's a little premature just because there are still things that could happen, whether it's big things, whether it's small things that kind of move the needles for different teams and things like that. There's still a lot of things that can happen. But the Pelicans came out at 45.5 wins, which again is up from last year's prediction, down from last year's win total of 49. Where do you think that is? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's too high? Do you think that's too low? 45.5 games, like just a little bit over 500, probably in the play-in mix again. Where's your head at?
I don't like this one. I don't like this. I think it's too low. And part of me saying I think it's too low is because they have the Sacramento Kings at like 46 wins, which Mike Brown is a great coach. De'Aaron Fox is a great point guard. Domantas Sabonis is a smaller basketball, Lithuanian basketball deity. But I don't know if the addition of DeMar DeRozan and the subtraction of Harrison Barnes warrants ESPN giving them more wins than a team that is adding DeJounte Murray, who beat that team 6 times or 5 times, whatever it was. in insurmountable and in a crazy amount of times last season. I just don't see that, and it's not so much as like being bullish on the Pelicans or anything like that, because obviously you still have to see this all play out. The fit, you don't even know who's the starting center, you don't know who's the starting lineup, you don't know anything about a lot of things about the Pelicans. And so obviously there are things that need to be figured out, and like you said, business that needs to be taken care of, in the sense of Trey Murphy and things like that. So there's a lot of things that the Pelicans have to figure out. So it's not so much that, it's just if you think that the Kings are going to win 46 games, I don't see how you can look, and we're talking about just regular season. So when it comes to regular season, fit matters in the regular season, but that's more of a playoff question. In the regular season, we're talking like talent. How many good players do you have? And I just think that the Pelicans have significantly more good players than the Sacramento Kings. Now, obviously, health and all of that, you take all that into consideration, especially with a team like the Pelicans. But I just don't know how, in this race to everybody gets better, how ESPN Bet can look at the Pelicans and look at the Sacramento Kings and say that the Kings are a better team. So I think that the Pelicans are going to win more games than the Sacramento Kings. And then by that logic, I think that this is low for the Pelicans, especially seeing that they won 49 games this past season, and obviously dealt with some injuries and things. But I think that this team coming into this season, I think that this team is better. If it means that just you have better talent with DeJounte Murray, and you have like better fitting big men already on the roster, in Yves Missi and Daniel Tyson, would soon to be Carlo Makovich. So I think that those bigs fit more. Obviously, JV was a much better player, maybe a much better individual player. But I think the fit is better, and I think adding DeJounte Murray to this team gets them over 40, add more wins than the Kings. And if the Kings are at 46, that means I have the Pelicans way higher than that.
So I think it's two different questions. So if the question is over under 45, is that fair? I'm going to say yes, and not because of talent, but because you're betting on the fact that someone's not going to be available. Trey Murphy's going to miss the first month of the season. CJ McCollum's going to get a lung issue out of nowhere. Brandon Ingram's going to, you're betting based off the Pelicans track record that something is going to go awry with one of their main rotation players. And so you're hedging your bets because you're still saying they're a pretty good team and they're probably in the playoff mix, but you also don't believe that their pieces and their health will be as consistent as they were last year. And so with that, sure. But I would hammer the over if I were a betting man in Vegas, just because, to your point, I think the Pelicans have gotten better despite some of the losses there. So since we last talked, there's been 2 contracts given out from the Pelicans. No, neither one of them is Brandon Ingram. So let's start with the first
one.
Or Trey Murphy. Carlo Makovich, again, going in the summer league, you and I talked about it. If there was ever a time for a center on this roster to make a statement, make an impact, step up and grasp some type of rotation minutes at the 5, now was the summer to do it for Carlo Makovich, which, again, didn't see much of him last year outside of his G League stint. Didn't see any of him in the NBA. So you really have no idea what the player is. So the Pelicans come out right after, again, David Griffin hops on the mic of the first Summer League game, talks about how they're excited about Carlo. The next Summer League game, Carlo comes out and drops 25. And it couldn't have worked out perfectly that he also got a contract right before that. 3 years, again, very minimal contract, $5 million for 3 years. But it was the part that comes after it that kind of got people with their eyes perked up around the Pelicans all around the league. David Griffin also comes out and says, hey, we like what we have at the center position, and we're going to lean into being small and fast. And again, you saw some of the traits that Carlos showed in Summer League, but it's hard to see, is that going to translate when you're going to get Joel Embiid versus whoever is playing the 5 at this random summer league game? This is risky, Garrett.
Is it?
Season with a Daniel Tice, a Carlo Makovich, and an Yves Missi. I love Carlo. First of all, let's talk about the contract. What do you think? Do they think that's fair? Do you think the Pelicans should probably be looking elsewhere? Where do you kind of land there? Let's start there.
Well, the contract is good for what the contract is good for what Carlo should be doing. Because listen, it is a with the 2 year, is it 2 with a 3rd year not guaranteed team option. So it's good because you need a guy to do the things that Carlo does as a big man, right? Daniel Tice can shoot, and Yves Missi is not shooting at all yet. So you kind of need somebody who's a little bit more comfortable in the event that you need that. What I'm worried about in this kind of play, what you said, is that he's gonna fall into the Larry Nance trap, which is this guy is supposed to be like a break in case of emergency or like a let's run him in as a scheme. Not really like your backup where this is the backup guy. Like this is the 30 minute guy or whatever the case is. And so that is the only thing. But the fit of Carlo is, again, you need a big man, you need an active body, you need a guy who's a little bit more comfortable behind the 3-point line. I like the contract. It's not a lot, and the Pelicans can get off of it. Or if Carlo plays well and to a point where somebody wants to include him in a trade, possibly, I think you'll be able to do that. But again, the center position, we'll move forward. Go with what you said, because I want to talk about the center position as a whole. And I think what David Griffin said may lean into or kind of explain what the thought process is, at least with this iteration of the team with Brandon Ingram involved.
Right. So let's start on the con side, right? This is where I'm going to start. With the centers that started in the playoffs last year. Chet Holmgren, Rudy Gobert, Nikola Jokic, Derek Lively.
Pretty good.
Zubac, Yusuf Nurkic, AD. Those are the starting centers. I'm sorry, all due respect to Carlo Makovich and Daniel Tice and Yves Missi, you are clearly the worst of that.
That's
like
keep it going.
Significantly worse. All right, let's talk about the centers that didn't make the playoffs.
There you go.
Domantas Sabonis, Alfred Şengün, Victor Wembanyama, Walker Kessler, DeAndre Ayton, and Jared Jackson Jr. / Mount E for the Grizzlies. You have the worst set of centers of that crop of centers as well. And so
you do.
Again, not to crash on the parade here, but let's talk about it just from a logic standpoint of what this means. Now, again, we've talked about it all season, and especially after you added DeJounte Murray. The Pelicans didn't need a Jonas Valanciunas, someone who could be an offensive hub, because they weren't going to play around him. They weren't going to put a player like that in a position, like people saying trade for DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton already is mad about the lack of shot attempts that he got while playing on a winning team. If you add him to a team, say you take Brandon Ingram off of it, but still have Trey Murphy and Zion and CJ McCollum and DeJounte, he's still not going to get. So you needed a low maintenance, cheap center who you just wanted to be able to stand by the goal and or in the dunker spot, occasionally hit an open three and rim protect. So in some ways, the Pelicans did just that. They got 3 players that center around that. You got an older vet to kind of usher you through the season. You got who knows in Carlo Makovich. Again, you saw good things from Summer League, and we'll get to that. But, you still don't know what that looks like versus, NBA talent. And then you got a young project who you hope throughout the course of the season will steal some of those minutes and demand playing time similar to Derek Lively, which, again, Derek Lively has played a lot more basketball than Yves Missi. So even though their skill sets might be similar, one is further along at this point than the other. And so, being that that's the case, you probably were already, we've talked about this before, you probably already were going to close games with Zion at the 5 or guarding the biggest player, or Trey being the tallest person on the court, because that's how you get your 5 best players on the court. But my question to you is, like, through this kind of mismatch version of how do we just match up versus whoever they throw out at the 5, how big of a risk is this? And, like, do you think it's a comfortable thing that the Pelicans should say, we feel good with what we have?
That's the $1 million question. So do I think the Pelicans should say we're okay, we're good with what we have? Absolutely not. I don't think that you should rest on your laurels when it comes to the center position with what you have. Now, this going into the season, if you are comfortable with the center position, says 2 things to me. Number one, you are betting that, yes, you might have the superior player, the superior talents at center, but 1 through 7, skip 5, but 1 through 7, the Pelicans should be able to run with anyone or be better than anyone. So you're banking on 1 through skip 5, 6, and 7 being absolutely incredible, right? Being great. And secondly, you're betting on Zion, and whether it's Brandon Ingram or DeJounte, taking another leap as a tandem or as a group of players. Because what this looks like is very similar to what the Dallas Mavericks did. And it worked for them. It took them to the finals. They had a veteran starter who should not be a starter. I mean, should not be playing the entire game, but can give you 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and Daniel Gafford. You had your project center, who obviously, like you said, Derek Lively is much more further along than Yves Missi, but you had a project center, young rookie center to come in and fill it way around. And then you had that kind of middle ground guy, shooter, athletic, kind of big in Maxi Kleber, which is what Carlo Makovich is. And so in a vacuum, you saw that can get you to the finals. But you have to look at everything around it. Luka and Kyrie were on another level when offensively they were on another level. Luka and Kyrie also bought in defensively. They also competed harder. They played harder, and they made sure to participate, as Jason Kidd likes to call it, on the defensive side. And it let Dallas go on this stretch where they were like the number 1 defense towards the end of the season. That is what you're banking on Zion and Brandon Ingram or DeJounte or whoever or Trey to turn that kind of turn. And so in a vacuum, it can work. Now, Dallas also did that in the middle of the season towards the trade deadline, and that's when they kind of took off. You're going through a whole season like this, trying to go, and this is kind of what made Dallas make the trade, because the center position wasn't working out for them the way. So they went and got Daniel Gafford. So what I'm saying is that in a vacuum, you can see that working, especially with the offensive firepower that you should have in DeJounte, in Zion, in Brandon Ingram, in Trey, in CJ, in Herb's improved corner three-point shooting, and Jordan Hawkins. And then if you have Matt Ryan coming up, you're banking on all of your offense basically coming from that. And so what I think that the Pelicans are basically saying is they're okay with centers having 6 points and 5 rebounds and a block, but they've deterred a lot of shots, or they've made a lot of plays that don't show up in the stat sheet. Can it work? Again, we've seen something similar to this work with Dallas, but it was dependent on the stars, the best players being available and being able to compete at a high level night in, night out, and being able to raise their defensive level and defensive intensity. And so it's going to be a lot for those guys to do that on a night in and night out basis. But if they do, then you have a shot with that amount of offensive talent. And if those three guys play their roles as rim protectors, switchability, energy guys, rebounders, those are gonna they have to do that. And I it can work, but it's gonna have a lot of them it's gonna take a lot of what I just talked about to happen. But I don't think they should just rest on their laurels. They need to continue to look around, because eventually you're gonna run into having to guard, some of these guys. Like Wemby's in your division, Sengun is in your division, Jaren Jackson and Edey are in your division. Like, you're gonna have to play those guys over Gafford and Lively are in your division. Like, you're gonna have to play those guys night in, night out, almost every other night. And so those guys are gonna have to play either out of their mind every single night, or you're gonna have some issues. But again, if Zion and the other star, whether it be Brandon Ingram or DeJounte, if those guys step up and take it to the next level, then I think that the Pelicans can be good. And it's kind of why I like them to have like they're over on the 45 wins.
The way I look at it is this: if you're going to play this way, which, to be honest with you, I think can work. Because, like, essentially to your point, yes, you've got to play all those guys, but you're betting that, different from Dallas, Luka, Kyrie, whoever else they had out there,
PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr.
PJ Washington, Derrick, those are not the level of athletes of Zion Williamson, Herb Jones, DeJounte. Like, you already had a top 10 defense. Now with Zion, if he shows up with game one, the way he ended last season, you have that defensive Zion, and if you get BI locked in on that defense, you're going to be hell to pay on they're betting that it's going to be so hard for you to score, and we're going to outrun you in transition, off turnovers, just through the gym, that if you want to throw it down to the post to Alfred Şengün 20 times a game, then so be it. And if that's how you beat us, so be it. Because the same way we just went through that list of centers in the West, not very many of those players are players that get it off their own. Those are players that are secondary and tertiary offensive options. And so if you've got to do that, you got to be hell to pay on the rebound. It's got to be a gang rebound. Listen, Willie Green already said this offseason that they're going to be relying more on their guards and wings to get rebounds. It's going to be more a community thing. Well, that's been, a downside of Zion's game up until this point. That's been an area that Trey could definitely get better at. BI can definitely – we just talk about the athleticism. A lot of rebounders just want to, right, from that standpoint. And so they're going to have to crash the boards. You talk about Dallas. We've talked about this before. I look at the Celtics. Even though Kristaps Porzingis is an animal at the 5, their guards and wings are killing it on the boards. Drew Holiday and all Derek White, like those guys are rebounders for guards, and so they play the same type of style that the essentially the Pelicans want to mirror. And so if that's going to be the case, it's going to take an uptick in that area from everybody else who's not the 5 to want to do more, both in the defensive end, the rebounding end, and to get easy buckets for those 5. Now you got athletic 5s that can catch lob passes, or you got athletic 5s that can be in the dunker spot, or athletic 5 who can occasionally hit an open 3. You got to be able to get it there, and that's been an issue for the Pelicans the past couple of years as well. And so it's going to be a team effort, really, to make up for the 5 if this is how they're going to enter the season. So let's talk about the falling dominoes from this. So it seems like Brandon Ingram will be entering the season on the expiring contract. Maybe, they come to an agreement in the next couple. You hope for all parties involved. But my question to you is, like, how big of a risk is this for literally Brandon Ingram and the Pelicans?
It is a giant, giant risk. Everybody is basically pushing their cards to the table and understanding that I need you, you need me, but I don't really need you. And, like, you kind of don't need me, but like we kind of it's a risk everywhere. It is a risk for Brandon Ingram. Listen, you're doubling down on the bet on yourself, right? He talked about it before last season in the media day that he was just trying to get this money. Like he's trying to get some of this money that's out there. and he bet on himself. I think it was kind of everybody figured that was going to happen. That's usually what good players who can possibly get to that next level. That's what they do. Jaylen Brown did it, worked out for him, signed the biggest contract in NBA history at the time. This is him doing it, doubling down on it. You're doubling down on it, on a situation where you think that you can go in and improve your value, improve your worth, and get the money that you think that you are owed, right? But you're running a huge risk of not only you not having another, not having a great year, but you're also running the risk of injury. And on a team, and I've talked to you about this. I've talked to some other people about this. On a team that the three players didn't fit well, the Pelicans didn't revamp their big three. They went and made it a big four. And on a team with Zion, CJ, and Trey on it, like you kind of had to change your game a little bit with them playing a lot, as many games as they did. Now you throwing in DeJounte Murray. And listen, DeJounte is going to fit perfectly with this team. He's going to get up and down. He's going to push Zion, but he's also going to shoot the ball. And so now you're throwing another person in that starting lineup who's going to want to shoot the ball and be on the ball a lot of the time. And so as Brandon Ingram, it's like, okay, well, if I couldn't get my value up high with just one person, but two, because CJ led the team in shot attempts with two people ahead of you, how's it going to work now that there's another person and Trey will now have this money? So a lot would you like to think. So a lot of they're going to be trying to get him involved to make sure that they're getting their bang for their buck with Trey Murphy. How do you raise your value up to that max contract level in this new second apron NBA with this new CBA? And on the Pelican side, you're running a huge risk of him having an incredible year. You being, it would be great for the Pelicans because it would obviously get them to where they want to go. But then if that does happen, like, do you have to either pay him or he's going to walk and you're going to lose Brandon Ingram for nothing. And again, in this new CBA, that doesn't hurt as much because we just saw it with Clay, we just saw it with Paul George. Teams are valuing flexibility over just getting locked down into contracts and getting over those aprons. However, the optics of Brandon Ingram leaving and you not getting anything back at all, that is not good. Especially when you could have, I'm not saying that this was something that should have happened. Obviously, you want to hold on to him, but you could have traded Brandon Ingram a season ago, before this second apron came on and everybody was kind of reluctant to give those contracts out and let this be someone else's head if you wanted to somebody else's problem, if you want to have that foresight. But just to have him walk and not receive any assets back would just it just would seem like a failure, and it wouldn't be great unless you worked out some kind of sign and trade where somebody else was pay him the money that he used. So it's a risk for everyone involved. I think Brandon Ingram right now, as he looks at the market, I think he's taking more of a risk because it is a lot. It is just as likely you don't have another a good year and like that market goes even further down. But the salary cap is projected to go up, so maybe that opens some doors for some other teams. But you never know what happens. But it is a risk for everyone involved, and I just think that if there is something that can be worked out, I think it would be, like you said, best for the Pelicans and for Brandon Ingram to get that worked out. And if there's just some spoiled feelings, or if there's just the fit is not there, do you work with that to get some assets back? Whether if it's something. But I just don't. It's just such a risk for everybody involved, and it gives me the icks. It gives me the icks.
Here's where I'm at with it. I do agree. I think it's way more risky for a player like Brandon Ingram, who has a history of injuries, nagging injuries, to go into the season not on a long-term deal. Because to your point, let's say you play average, or let's say you play okay but not max level grade. Well, next summer when you go to free agency, I don't think teams are going to be lined up to pay you max dollars then either. And so you're going to be in the same boat negotiating down with a new situation, a new position. Like, I just don't see a lot of wins for Brandon Ingram.
To that point, because I wanted to make this point, to that point that you just made about trying to do it with another organization. Another thing that I think is very slept on about Brandon Ingram and the Pelicans is that Brandon Ingram kind of is like royalty with the Pelicans. He's like a child, like he's like the Pelicans baby, right? Like he's the last remaining asset from the AD trade. He's got his first All-Star here in New Orleans. Like he has a lot of things that is red carpeted out. What we've seen, what the league has shown you is that no one really values you that in that way, right? So as far as wanting to pay you the money. And I think that even if he found a team, like even if he got to Philly or got to one of these other teams, I think he would just be another piece. Like he would, like Paul George is in Philly, right? Like in LA, I'm from LA, I'm home. In Philly, you just like, bro, go sit in that corner and wait for Joel and Tyrese to do their thing. I just think that Brandon Ingram has a good thing to where he can have his cake and eat it too in a city that values him, in an organization that values him. I think a lot more than any other organization would value a guy who's reluctant to change his game. At least on the court, we see it, kind of reluctant to change his game and kind of reluctant to shoot the threes. DeMar is one of the NBA's greats, and he's on team whatever, right now because the game has kind of passed him by as far as his play style. And I'm not saying Brandon Ingram has that kind of career, but I think in New Orleans, he is a focal point. He is a fulcrum. He is a leader of the team. And I don't know where he would get that and also still be in possibly a winning situation like he is here in New Orleans.
Right. David Griffin called Brandon Ingram mechanically incapable of being traded. So essentially, we're not going to get any value back, and nobody wants him at his cost. So there's nowhere to go with this. And to your point, I do think that this is one of the few, like if you look at this landscape of the NBA, this is one of the few places where he would both be the number 2 option, because I do think that Brandon Ingram would still be the second best player on this team if the Pelicans tipped off today, but also have a chance to win. Because if he's going to be a number 1 option or even number 2 option, show me the team that he's going to be able to put himself in a position to be a top 4 in that conference, because I don't see that readily available. Here's the other part about all this. Again, I truly believe, I know his value's at an all-time low. He's coming off the worst season, both FIBA and NBA, that you could come off of in his career. Again, we've talked about it every year up until this one. He's gotten better and better until this one. But he's never really, really gotten the opportunity to learn how to be both a 2 guard and also the number 2. Because when you first started with Zion, he got hurt. So you were learning each other. They were learning how to be great, and B.I. ascended while Zion kind of faded into the dust, right? And then Brandon Ingram brings the team to the playoffs when Zion's not available. And then Zion becomes available at the beginning of this year, but like he's not really Zion yet. And then Zion turns into Zion about midway through this year, and then Brandon Ingram's hurt. So at no point did he really learn, this is how I play off of him. This is how we play off together. And like if you listen to some of the things that he said after the season was better, when they asked, can you 2 work? He's like, yeah, it starts with communication. I think that B.I. knows, just like the rest of the world knows, either you have to evolve your game and add the 3-point shot, or your career will end up like DeMar DeRozan with not very many championships to show for it. And I think he's well aware of it. I don't think it takes podcasts and ESPN shows for him to know that he needs to add the 3-point game. But again, when we've always said Brandon Ingram has been the best in a Pelicans uniform, where he takes 1 to 0 dribbles and just rises up and shoots. Well, now you got a point guard in DeJounte or in Zion that will be able to put you in positions to do just that more consistently, where you feel comfortable letting it fly from 3 or whatnot. And so the Pelicans in some ways said, look, B.I., Here's the situation for you to thrive in. When you were shooting 6 and 7 threes a game, you had Lonzo, you had Drew Holiday. We got DeJounte. We got Zion to get you looks. If it's not going to be now, it's never going to be, right? And so, to your point, there's a lot of risk with both the Pelicans and with Brandon Ingram. But really, he's being put in a situation where if you can't make this work, I'm not sure that a one option or a two option on a championship team is ever going to be there for you. So that brings into question a lot of things. You bring in this firepower, DeJounte Murray. Obviously, you send some rotational pieces out. And immediately the question, and it depends on what forum that you look at, it's like, well, what are the Pelicans starting lineups going to be? Here's how I'll start with locks. And when I say locks, I am like 99.9% sure that this is going to be the starting lineup. Let's start with number one. Zion Williamson. He's an
he's starting?
best player.
Okay, cool.
Going to be starting. Brandon Ingram, also an all-star. Been the best player at times for this team. DeJounte Murray, also an all-star. You traded for him for a reason to come organize your team. Herbert Jones. First team listen, I love that, again, Trey's skill set it complements Zion. It complements everyone in the starting lineup because he doesn't need the ball to be at his best, and you need that type of floor spacing. But Herb Jones just shot 40% from three and was first team all defense. Trey, again, the contract with Trey, and we'll get to that and what that looks like. But, let's not act like Trey hasn't been playing close to starter minutes these past couple years. Zion's been out, and B.I. has been out, and CJ has been out, and Trey's played damn near 30 minutes a game anyways, and still you haven't seen that next, just give Trey the ball step where he can go create offense for you. Keep waiting for it. And on the defensive end, he got better toward the end of last year, but I don't think you're going to go from, hey, Herb, go guard Shea, to, hey, Trey, you got Shea. I just don't, or DeJounte, I don't think that's going to happen. So Herb Jones, I think, is absolutely going to start on this team. And then I think it's one of the centers. Do you think I'm off? Do you think I'm off base? Or are the Pelicans looking at $50 million probably between CJ and Trey Murphy and is this what we're bringing off the bench?
No, I think you're on. And again, this is a semi-good problem to have. Oh no, there's too many good players. There's 4 all-stars in the starting lineup or 3 all-stars in the starting lineup. I don't think you're off because the Herb Jones is the question, is the one everybody's going to be looking at. Does Herb or Trey start? Because I think everybody can agree that CJ is probably, you're going to be on the bench. And I think it's not really a question. And so I think that's fine. You just put that to the side. Herb, the best version, you get the best value of Herb Jones as a starter, guarding the team's best player. Not only did he make first team all NBA, but all defense. Sorry about that. But he made first team all defense in a year where you could vote for all 5 centers if you wanted to. So if you think about the context there, he beat out everybody, not just wings. He beat out everybody. So he is a phenomenal defender, and you get the best value of him guarding the best player. Bringing him in and having him guard backup guards or backups, that's a waste of time. So I think you do get the best value. And Trey, you can get good value of Trey, or the best value of Trey, in any lineup. I think he's one of the more malleable players on the team because of his shooting, because of his constant movement, because of his ability to play up and play down as far as offense goes. He can kind of shoot over smaller players, but he could also, kind of wiggle around and do some things on some smaller players. He's not great there, but he can do it. And so around bigger guys, he could do that. I think he can be malleable with any lineup. I keep saying it. Watching basketball all these years and covering the NBA the way it is, think sometimes team building is not linear, and sometimes you plan for things and other things could come ahead of you and you have to capitalize on it. I've always said that my test example of this saying is that Karl Anthony Towns never saw Ant coming. He was comfortable in Minnesota as the star, as the guy, and then Ant showed up and took the reins from the team. I don't think CJ saw Trey coming, right? CJ came, then Trey is like, okay, Trey is probably a better fit for the starting lineup for CJ. And then the Pelicans got DeJounte Murray landed in their lap for Dyson Daniels and Larry Nance. We talk about, rotational players and not star players. So they never saw that coming. And so now you just kind of have this morass of players, really good players. And so, like you said, you have about three 99.9% locks in Zion, Brandon Ingram, and DeJounte. Herb is like, I would say, an 80% lock because, Willie Green is an interesting guy. He's an interesting fella.
Even more reason why Herb will not be touching the bench.
Right. I could see him going more of the leadership, wants the veteran leadership of CJ. You just never know with him. But I do think that Herb is the starter, and you get the best value of this of him as the starter. I see people asking who starts at center. I would probably, if I had to have an outlook on that, I would say Daniel Theis, only because he's the proven starter. But I think it's gonna be like, I keep bringing him back up, like the Mavs. Some games Daniel Gafford started and played majority of the minutes. Some games Derek Lively start. I don't think you're gonna be looking at, okay, this is a set rotation as starter. Like set minutes every night. I think this is about as every night is gonna be different as you can get. But I do think Daniel Theis starts because he's the established guy. He's played in the NBA. He's the starter on the Germany national team and has been that and has played well. He played well against Team USA in their run-up game. And so I think Theis starts, but I do think that Carlo and Yves could easily play more minutes than him, and maybe Carlo does start at some point in time. But I do think Theis starts at center just because he brings the veteran leadership. He's the established guy, and he can hit an open three if need be. And I think he'll be the easiest to kind of plug in and have everybody kind of set defensively. He and Herb, as opposed, I think Carlo is going to need some time to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Willie Green says they're going to compete in training camp, and who knows, maybe Carlo just makes it obvious, which again, that's the best case scenario. You go to training camp and it's obvious that Carlo needs to start, or it's obvious that Yves needs to start, or whatever it may be, right? Like, you want to go to training camp and figure out this guy is obviously better than, again, Daniel Theis is a stopgap, a player to get you through, someone who has a lot of know-how and someone you can trust, and is pretty good defensively and not a liability offensively. So, like, you know what you're getting versus you don't know yet what you're getting with the other two. And, again, time will tell there. Here's my thing on, like, the money situation. So, the Pelicans have no players next season who are making $40 million or more. Literally every team in the West has at least one. I mean, look at the Minnesota roster, and they have nothing, right? From that end. And so, yes, Trey Murphy's probably going to get a contract somewhere north of $25 million per year. And yes, CJ McCollum is still owed $33 million to probably be your sixth man next season. But if you look at how the money is spread out, you got Zion at 36, BI at 36, CJ at 33, DeJounte at 29, and then Herb and Trey, whatever they end up there. So you kind of, instead of saying we're going to pay the top two guys, and it's funny that we talked about this last season. If you would have looked at the West coming down the stretch, you'd be like, the Pelicans are playing good, except their two best players are probably not playing as good as any other team's two best players. And the Pelicans are saying, we're going to pay them that way, or they're not significantly high. Again, Zion's in his fund max right now, so he's not making $50 million, $60 million. And to be honest, he hasn't earned that yet. And so it kind of falls along that line of Zion figuring it out, still getting paid around the same as BI. That's the other part of this. BI, you can't ask for 50 and we're going to pay Zion 40. Like
That's what
This
Paul
ain't
George
Jason
said.
Tatum and Jalen Brown. Like this ain't
Paul
that,
George
right?
said I wasn't going in there and asking for more for Kawhi. Why would I do that? Yeah, you can't. That's not going to happen.
Wasn't going to happen, right?
Yeah,
and so, to your point about roster construction, right? There's multiple ways to construct your roster. The Pelicans have more of a spread versus a spike, like some other teams have. And again, time will tell whether or not that's work, but it gives them flexibility where you don't have some Rudy Gobert contract that nobody wants, right? You have options to pivot if something were to go awry, if someone steps up and someone becomes expendable at that point. So there's still a lot of time left in the offseason. Again, it's still a couple months from that standpoint. But let's talk about let's call it Summer League. I don't know what it was. The Pelicans went 0-5. And let's talk about some of the takeaways.
They have come so far. Do you remember when the Pelicans went undefeated? Like they would not lose.
I remember Najee was dancing with the trophy. All right. It's been a while. It's been a minute since then. So I want to start with the positive. So obviously we've been talking about Carlo Makovich. Again, if this summer league didn't happen, I think David Griffin would get like daily tweets and snail mails and phone calls about what are you doing at the center position. You have no hope there other than this 19-year-old kid who's just been playing basketball. But Carlo Makovich came out. He got better each game. Obviously, the crazy 25-point game where he couldn't miss, was dunking everything, was swatting things out like he had mama mentality on 2K. Like literally was doing everything. But again, it's not so much the stats. It's not so much the competition. It was the traits for me. You saw a little bit of the rim protection. You saw a little bit of the floor spacing. You saw a little bit about the lob threat. You saw a little bit of switchability where he would be isolated on perimeter and be able to hold his own. You saw a little bit of the rebounding. You saw a little bit of him finding the right spots on the court to be and make himself available. So you saw a little bit of everything you need to see for a center that's on this team. What was your takeaway from Carlo, who was probably the best Pelican throughout Summer League?
Yeah, this is what we asked for, right? Right before the Summer League started, you asked me what I wanted from Carlo. I said, just show something, because this is the opportunity of a lifetime for you, for a team that has high expectations, but doesn't have anyone to kind of play the position that you play and are looking for you to step up and be the guy. And he showed it. Like you said, you're not looking, when you're looking at the center position, you're not looking for how good is this individual player. Now, if they pop off like he did with the points and things, then great, fantastic. I just don't know if he's going to get that kind of green light and offensive flowing through him in a regular season. Even if like one or two people are injured, you still got, like we just talked about, CJ and Trey off the bench to throw in there. But you saw, like you said, the switchability, the rim protection, willing to go up and go for blocks, willing to step up and guard the center. The athleticism popped off the screen. He was jumping, he was flying, he was dunking. You want that athleticism after watching the Pelicans go through a season with JV, JRE, and Larry Nance, where Larry Nance's athleticism popped off the screen for the Pelicans because you didn't really have anything else for the big man. He's not really the greatest athlete if you look at some of the other guys around the team. But Carlo showed a lot of like almost like an evolved version of Larry Nance, right? A younger, athletic, more athletic version of it. And so, yeah, you saw him step out and be comfortable getting shots up. There's just a lot to like about Carlo. And again, if he comes into training camp and wins out and it's a no questions asked, that's the best case scenario for the Pelicans, because they have him locked up for 2 years at a really cheap contract. And if he gives you good minutes this year and gives you good next year until you can address it with either a star center or a starter level center, or Carlo is now ready to be your center moving forward, that's the best case scenario. But I think he showed exactly what you want as the fit for the center for the Pelicans, whether it be starting some games and playing 25, 30, 35 minutes, or if it's the center by committee where it's closer to 20, or where everyone, I think that he could play in those 20 minutes and be great at what he does and contribute in a high fashion. So this is exactly what you want to see from Carlo. Just go out there and show some of the things that you want from a Pelicans big man, and he put it on displays. And that 25-point game was wow. It came. I was like, this. Does he know that this is Summer League and not Game 7 of the fight? He is cooking out here. So If he can have 1 or 2 of those games in like every 10 games, then great. But I think that he showed exactly what you want to see from him this summer league.
Right. So you go from probably the best player on the Pelicans throughout the summer league to Jordan Hawkins, who had a rough summer league. Like, there's no better way to talk. We talked about he was the highlight. He was really, to be honest, he's probably the only player anyone had expectations of going into this summer league for this Pelicans team. You had no idea what you're getting from Yves. Didn't know too much about Carlo. Didn't know too much about Antonio. And everybody else, you're like, who is that? So, like, Jordan Hawkins was the player everyone came to see. Now, of course, the Pelicans have an injury. Crutcher gets hurt right before summer happens. So there is no point guard. So they're like, oh, here, Jordan Hawkins. Now you're the point guard. And so you did want to see a little bit of more freedom with him as a ball handler and playmaker and see what he could do. He's definitely not there, and at least not there yet, right? Like, lots of turnovers. Still, you needs to add play strength. Like, you can tell it hurts him on offense and defense because people can get into his jersey and just make it uncomfortable for him to get to spots. But all in all, I don't think that's necessarily what you need from Jordan Hawkins, right? Like, you wanted him to come in here and obviously hit some shots. He didn't hit any shots last summer league, so something tells me he's still going to be able to shoot come the regular season this year. But you wanted to see, could he be good enough on the defensive end? And from my perspective, I think he's got a little bit better there. Like, again, he still needs to add weight. You'll probably be saying that for the next couple of off seasons for him. But for me, it wasn't like overpowering that, oh man, they're just treating him like our little brother in the backyard, and there's nothing he can do to stop him from getting to the rim. Like, I think that this was a show on the defensive end that, hey, all right, he stepped it up from that perspective, but from the offensive end, still just a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I think the Pelicans put Jordan Hawkins in a bad position for a good reason. I think that's kind of how I would justify it. They asked him to be the point guard, right, Tedra, just to kind of like, hey, we're going to force you, show us what you have when it comes to putting the ball on the floor. What I took from him struggling with the ball handling and things is that I think we need to turn it a little bit down of Ray Allen and Rip Hamilton, and maybe turn up a little bit more of a more athletic version of Kyle Korver, where you don't do any dribbling. We're just not gonna do the dribbling because, again, Hawk is an older player, and so I think that his handle can get better with time. Again, I just don't know when he will have that opportunity on the Pelicans team, who, if you think about people who's going to be handling the ball, you got Zion, you got Brandon Ingram, you got DeJounte Murray, you got Herb Jones, you got CJ McCollum. Oh, yeah, Jose Alvarado still plays for the team as well. So before you even get to Jordan Hawkins even thinking about dribbling the ball, we're talking about 6 people that's going to be ahead of him at all times, unless all 6 of them are hurt, which we saw him do in Dallas, where he just was like, to hell with it, I got it. So again, it was not the greatest. He absolutely needs to pick up more strength. He absolutely needs to pick up more kind of in-game strength. And what I mean by that is knowing when those presses are coming. People know that you're skinny. They know that you're small. But use that to their advantage. Use their aggression to your advantage. I don't think Jordan Hawkins will ever dribble a ball as much as he did in this regular season as he did in the summer league. So I wasn't really concerned about that because I know he's not a point guard. I don't know who thought he was. I'm glad that they gave him an opportunity to just kind of show him, hey, show us what you can do. But I saw what I needed to see when it comes to Jordan Hawkins as a point guard, as a ball handler. And we don't need to do that anymore. Can he run around screens? Can he get open shots? Can he create mismatches on one side because he's a 5-alarm fire, because he'll get it up and he'll get those shots up? And I do think that he'll make a lot more shots with more talent on the floor and more open shots. Again, everybody went into this summer league like that guy is going to be the guy for the Pelicans. What I did like to see the summer league started off with him rebounding the ball and catch and shoot threes. We just talked about how much rebounding is going to be important for this team. He is a great rebounder for a guard, and I think as long as he continues to do that, as long as he continues to be confident in his shot and cause some of those mismatches because he's a 5 fire, the defense, he has to pick up more strength, but I think he knows defense. I just think that his body doesn't allow him to do some of the things that he should be doing. But I saw a little less ball watching. I saw a little less letting people put him on his hip and just kind of go by him. He was fighting a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. So it was an ugly showing on offense because he was put in the position he was in. But I do think the fit for the Pelicans have enough great players, good talented players. Now we're talking about 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guy. You need those guys to fill in and be specialists at things and plug certain holes. And I think Jordan Hawkins, his movement shooting, his ability to knock down a shot, and even if he missed a shot, the next one's going up. I think that causes defenses to worry about him a little bit more, which will open up the floor for a lot of other different guys who he'll be on the floor with. If he plays.
I couldn't agree more. Again, I don't want to watch Jordan Hawkins dribble in the regular season. Like, if he touches the ball, I want him probably to shoot the ball. And that is because he is playing off the gravity of everybody else, right? And so, again, up and down summer, mostly down from that standpoint. But again, it's a growing spot for him, and I think he will be fine next to the rest of the talent on his roster. I see it in the comments, and I want to talk about it because we highlighted him going into the Summer League. Antonio Reeves was the other player not named Trey Murphy or Brandon Ingram to get a deal from the Pelicans this summer so far. Signed a 3-year deal as a second-round player. Garrett, I think he could contribute this year. We talked about it. You had to get more athletic at the center position. You got 3 new centers. You had to figure out who was the new lead guard because CJ cannot be the starting point guard anymore. The third thing was, how are you going to get the type of production off the bench by losing a Najee Marshall? I think Antonio Reeves is not the defensive player that Najee Marshall is, but I think in the ways that Najee was able to impact the game, being thrown in out of nowhere from the defense and sometimes the offensive end, Antonio Reeves might have a couple of those games this season. Like, he's an older player and, again, good enough on the defensive end, but has so many different ways that he can score on the offensive end that, again, the Pelicans just lacked last season. We saw it. Like, if it wasn't the main players, the role players were there for a role, and it wasn't to score. Antonio Reeves could be that scorer off the bench, not just a shooter like Jordan Hawkins. And where he might be different than a Jordan Hawkins or a Trey Murphy, I think he's further along in terms of ways he can score than both of those players. And probably behind CJ, your best creator of self-offense from that standpoint. What are your thoughts on Antonio Reeves throughout this summer league where he kind of flew under the radar of Jordan Hawkins, but like he put together a solid summer league for a second-round pick?
Hell yeah, he did. I was impressed by Antonio Reeves. I knew coming into summer league that, he had some game. I mean, again, Reed Shepherd went, 3rd in the draft, and he wasn't even the leading scorer. Like, Antonio Reeves was. And so I knew he could get buckets. Can you do it at a consistent level? And I think there were times, like you said, he's a 3-level scorer and a confident 3-level scorer. He's a walking bucket. They call him Quiet Storm at Kentucky because, again, he's a quiet guy, but he can get buckets. He can fill it up. And I think that he can contribute. Like, the Pelicans gave him a deal. Like, this is a guy that they can contribute. And we've seen, relative unknowns come into the Pelican system and get an opportunity to play and contribute, right? Again, Jose was an undrafted free agent rookie. It was on the floor for the playoffs for the Pelicans. Night and day. Went from undrafted to being on the floor at the end of games for the Pelicans in the playoffs. So you've seen guys be able to come in and contribute. And I love what you say about, like, kind of plugging in where Najee is, because, again, they're different players, but the to your point, the same way Najee came in, and he came in defensively, right? He came in making his name defensively. We all remember his early years when he was the defender on the floor, and everybody's like, "Who's this guy?" I think Reeves, and again, and Najee's offensive game came along. I think Reeves is like the tethered version. I think he could come in and you'd be like, "Wait, Reeves got 8 points in this quarter," and then he uses his hands. He's good with his hands and gets steals and stuff. So I think his defense will come along, but he's going to contribute and affect the game in an offensive way. That's kind of similar to the way Najee did, and kind of similar to the way that Jose does. The Jose comes in and he finds a way to contribute on the defensive end, which then in turn usually gets his offense going. I think Reeves is gonna be a little kind of different. He's gonna come in and do the offensive things, and then the defensive things. He's gonna get a couple of steals. You're gonna be like, whoa, what's going on? And then he'll start to get his defensive mojo as his career goes on. But again, I can't agree more. I think that he's gonna come in and score. He's 6'6". So we're talking about CJ as the sixth man. We're talking about that third guard spot. Is it Jordan Hawkins? Is it Jose? Is it Antonio Reeves at 6'6", a guy who can come in and do a little bit more with a little more wingspan and length and things? So I was impressed by Antonio Reeves. And again, Pelicans obviously feel the same way by offering him a contract.
Right. So the last player we're going to talk about is the Pelicans' first-round pick, Yves Missi. Look, just viewing the games that he played, I think he looked pretty good. And he got better each game. Again, there were some plays where you're like, what was that? But then there were some other players who were like, oh. And that's what you expect. And that's probably what you're going to get a lot of from him over the next however many years, potentially, from that standpoint. But here's the thing and that we've always kind of harped our hand on. I still think the kid is going to play this year because he's good on the defensive end. Now, he needs to learn not to go for every block and to know when to stay vertical from that standpoint. But like the athleticism and the approach and the patience to wait for blocks and to be able to guard in space. I saw him block a jumper. Like Willie Green's going to look at that and be like, yeah, I need that from the 5, right? And so, yeah, he had some off-kilter, crazy offensive trials where Zach Edey was like, what are you trying? And that's not going to work. But like at the same time, the things you wanted to see in terms of the alley-oops, the chase down blocks, the putback slams, the things that you saw from him in college, you saw at this level. And again, it's going to be on him to refine his work, refine his basketball knowledge and IQ, and be in the gym and get his body ready. But I think this kid has got potential. What were your thoughts on Yves Missi this summer?
I have a slightly different opinion about him because I think that about what you said, just off of what you said, because I don't think he's going to play enough minutes where I don't care if you go for every block. Go for every block. I don't think Yves Missi being in foul trouble because you got Carlo, you got Daniel Tice. I don't think Yves Missi being in foul trouble is necessarily a bad thing as far as like it's gonna like detour the whole game. Go for every block because you're gonna need as much rim deterrent as possible if you're gonna play, this center by committee. You need to be down for it. Remember what Daniel Gafford did. Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford went for every block. What I loved about Yves Missi was that he got dunked on and he immediately went for another block. And they asked him about it post-game, and he said, listen, it's going to happen. I'm going to get dunked on, but guess what? I'm going to go for the next one. You know who else said that? Rudy Gobert. And he won Defensive Player of the Year 4 times. Not saying Yves Missi is anywhere close to they're going to do that, but I like the mentality of going for block no matter what, because that is Yves' game. He doesn't shoot the 3 ball. So you have to be that guy rebounding and blocking shots to stay on the floor, right? We saw JV had to change his game to the 3-point line because he was not doing the rim protecting and the switchability. So he had to find something else to kind of stay on the floor and contribute. If you're not going to shoot the 3 ball, that's fine. To understand that he's very raw, still hasn't played the game for a long time. You have to be a demon at the rim, going for blocks and rebounds. And I think that he has that energy and he has that mentality to do so. He's young enough to not know better. And I love that about Yves, and I love that about his defensive mindset. Now, there was some times where, like you said, Zach Edey stonewalled him, and there was some ugly jumpers at the mid-range dribble pullback. I don't know what was going on. But I did see some things. I saw him put it on the ground and do the things that I was asking that I saw on film. One dribble, I'm at the rim to dunk. The lob threats. Reeves, they weren't connected very often, but they were throwing it to him, and he was going for them. And I like that. Like, be springy, be bouncy, and things on the offensive side. I just think that he has a lot of potential as a very raw player. I think if his sky is like Serge Ibaka, then I would be perfectly fine with that as far as the Pelicans having a guy moving forward. If it turns more to be Derek Lively, where he's a better rebounder in that, I think they're fine with that. But I don't think his floor is super low. So I think that he's like where he is right now, as far as how long he's played and where he is defensively. I think that raises his floor a lot. And I just think, like you said, he's going to get some minutes this season, because if he don't care about nothing else, he care about defense. And this guy can come in and be good defensively. Again, best case scenario is that Carlo and Yves show that they are 1 and 2 as the center, and Daniel Tice takes the back seat. That's the best case scenario. But again, this guy is super raw, super young, has to learn the NBA game, has to learn verticality rules, has to learn referee tendencies as far as bodying people up as they drive. But he has the energy, he has the feet, and he has the mentality to do all of those things. And so I'm interested to see. I think he's one of those guys that our old statement is, you only get better at basketball by playing basketball. I think he is the test case for the Pelicans this season. Very similar to how Trey and Jordan Hawkins were last season. I think he is now the test case for it. And I think that he can be really good as a guy who can give you really, really high energy moments, and then not have to rely so much on him because, again, you're doing the center by committee, or if you're going to make the move and get a starting center.
Yeah, to your point, it seems as of right now the Pelicans are comfortable entering the season with Brandon Ingram on expiring, with center by committee. Now, during the season, trade deadline, all these might be different, and they left themselves a lot of flexibility to make changes. But again, time will tell if this either helps their season out the gates or they're forced to make a move. But with that being said, that's all we got for you today. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll talk a little bit about how the U.S., hopefully the games aren't as close when they get to the actual Olympic Games. But what you got left for the people, Garrick?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. It's going to be a very interesting Olympic run for Team USA. You got a Pelican to watch. Germany is in there, so if you want to watch Daniel Tice, go for it.
Hey man, don't you sleep on Jose Alvarado.
I'm sorry, and Jose Alvarado of Puerto Rico is definitely playing as well. So should be interesting. But yes, the Pelicans, again, there's still a lot of runway left for things to happen. I know it seems like free agency is over, but the big moves I think are done. But you still have opportunities to make some moves and do some things, to kind of bolster the team. And again, there's somebody all be from you. They make a trade for the center, but for now, this is who's on the team. This is who's going into the season. And so until they make a trade, you can't just fabricate people on the team and say, oh, this, that, and other. And then all of a sudden, game one is there, and you're like, well, this is who's on the center. So on the roster. So this is who you have. And I think the Pelicans have a decent shot to kind of make this work. It's just going to require a lot of work from everybody else. So as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO Basketball No E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social media. Most importantly, like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next time.